Good morning, everybody. Last minute in late afternoon yesterday, the Attorney General here in Arizona filed indictments against what they're calling the fake electors and Rudy Giuliani and let's see, name all the names. So the following individuals are named as defendants in the indictment: Kelly Ward, Tyler Bauer, Nancy Cottle, Jacob Hoffman, Anthony Kern, James Lehman, Robert Montgomery, Samuel Moorhead, Lorraine Pellegrino, Gregory Salston, and Michael Ward. That's Kelly Ward's husband. And they've also indicted Mayor Giuliani and Mark Meadows and a couple of Trump's attorneys that were all involved here in Arizona during that time when they were questioning the election results here in Arizona. So she brought these indictments, and it's pretty scary in a way because of what they're facing. Let me see. Not this one. That's not the one I wanted to look at. There's a little fly buzzing around my head. I think this is it. So those indicted include former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, attorneys Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, John Eastman, and Christina Bobb, top campaign advisor Boris Epstein, and former campaign aide Mike Roman. So they were all charged in this indictment. And this comes at the end of a year-long investigation by our Democratic Attorney General Chris Mays, who won by, I think it was like 280 votes against Abe Hamadin. So that Attorney General election here in Arizona in 2022 was a big issue. And Arizona is the fourth state after Michigan, Georgia, and Nevada to seek charges against those who formed an alternate slate of presidential electors. So in releasing the indictment, she redacted some of the names of the other individuals, but they did name them here in the Washington Post. So let me see. I mean, there's felony charges against these people. I'm trying to see if this article names them. This fly is driving me crazy. I don't know if you can see it on camera when it buzzes by my face. So the indictment said that the pro-Trump electors made statements directly contradicting any intention that their votes would only be used if they succeeded in legal challenge that changed the outcome of Arizona's election. So they did this with the intent that they were questioning the election and that there could be a different result in the election. And so that's why they went ahead and did this. It's not because that they were trying to do something fishy. And they were just assuming that they were going to go ahead and be successful in the court battle. I do want to share this statement from Charlie Kirk because Tyler Bauer works at Turning Point, and Charlie Kirk put out a great statement. The Arizona Democratic attorney Chris Mays, who received just 280 votes more than her Republican opponent, is pursuing radical and unprecedented criminal charges against 7 attorneys for Donald Trump, and went on to name them. Those electors, the 11 Republican electors, include Charlie Kirk's colleague and friend Tyler Bauer, the national committeeman for Arizona and head of Turning Point Action. What are the charges for? For trying to follow the law and following a precedent created by Democrats. In 1960, in the race between Kennedy and Nixon, Hawaii was very closely contested. While Hawaii certified Nixon as a winner of the state's electoral votes, Democrats claimed otherwise. They assembled their own slate of electors and submitted their votes to D.C. to be counted while the state worked out the contest in the courts. Exactly what happened here in Arizona in 2022. In 2020, I'm sorry. Importantly, this worked, and after initially certifying Nixon's electors, Hawaii's recount concluded that Kennedy had won the state by just 150 votes. and the state's governor retracted the Nixon certification and submitted a new one in favor of Kennedy. Kennedy votes were only counted because the Kennedy electors acted before the courts had ruled. And here's a quote from Politico when they wrote about this dispute. Judge Ronald Jameson agreed that the certified Kennedy electors were legitimate, but more significantly, Jameson said it was important that those electors met and gathered on December 19th, 1960, as prescribed by the Electoral Count Act. Rather than suggest the Democratic electors committed fraud, the judge pointed out at their meeting as a key step that preserved their ability to be counted after the recount showed Kennedy had actually won the state. So if our not our but if the court hearings and the court challenges were approved and these Republican electors hadn't done what they did, they feared that it wouldn't be legitimate because they didn't do it by the date that's specified by the Electoral Count Act. The Arizona Trump electors were doing what they thought was a legally necessary step as part of a wider political and electoral dispute. They acted in the belief that Donald Trump was a true winner of Arizona in the 2020 election. They engaged in no fraud and no deception. In fact, they literally published a press release explaining what they were doing. These indictments of this entire investigation are a sinister effort to criminalize pursuing all legal and constitutional avenues for contesting a disputed election. Attorney General Mays and her national Democratic handlers want to criminalize and punish political dissent. Democrats have once again turned the justice system into their weapon for targeting political opponents, and they are doing this because they have no accomplishment to run on in 2024 and are terrified of losing power and see no option available except for jailing their opponents like some tin-pot third world dictatorship. I sincerely hope that they pay for overplaying their hand in Arizona and beyond. We stand by Tyler Bauer and everyone else. They did nothing wrong. We will win. That was the statement by Charlie Kirk today. And you have to agree with them. I mean, you know, in those unprecedented times in 2020, when so much craziness was happening here in Arizona, everybody was confused by what was happening. And when you challenge an election in the court system, you know, and if it had been overturned in February or March, if the Trump electors hadn't filed their paperwork by the date that was required by the Electoral Act, what would have happened? It was certified that Biden won, and so that's the one from the electors, the Democratic electors. That's the one that had the state seal on it. So I can see why they did this sort of thing. And the problem with mainstream media is they don't talk about the reasons behind some things are done. You have to understand the reasoning behind it. And, you know, I don't think that they acted illegally or thought that they were going to change the outcome of the vote by what they did. They just wanted to make sure their paperwork was turned in time so that there wouldn't be any question if their court challenge succeeded. So that's what's going on. It's going to be very interesting because these people are all charged with 9 indictments. Some of them are 9 charges. Some of them are felonies. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the next few weeks. And, you know, there's several elected Arizona state representatives. And, of course, Kelly Ward was the past chair of the Arizona RNC Republican Party here in Arizona. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But I wanted to go ahead and just mention that today because, you know, it's something that happened late yesterday afternoon, and I don't know that everybody gets the news. So that's what's going on there. We've got some really contested elections that are going to be primary elections that are going to be happening here in Arizona. I was on a Zoom call yesterday afternoon, and they were talking about the different districts. And we've got the Republicans have a very slight lead in the House and the Senate here in Arizona. And you've got some representatives, one who backed out because of a petition challenge on signatures. You've got, I think, 11 or 12 other challenges going on. I haven't heard what the outcome is of those, if they've even got them done. So, and I think another person who was in the race dropped out because of election challenges or petition signature challenges. And somebody else was probably, they were looking at that person to drop out too, because they had the same company that was going out and getting signatures for payment. And some of these signatures were kind of wanky, and they don't know that they were actually done by the voter who's registered to vote. So that's still an ongoing thing here in Arizona, but this primary is going to ramp up to be pretty interesting. I'm lucky enough in my bid for Arizona State Representative in LD9. There's 2 House seats, and I'm running for one of the House seats. And we've got 2 Republican candidates, and then we've got 2 Democratic candidates. So we don't have a primary, but we will have the general election. And, you know, when they did the redistricting here in Arizona, it split our previous legislative district 25 in half and created legislative district 9 and 10. And so basically 9 was a newly created district, and the 2 Democrats, well, the 3 Democrats, the state senator and the 2 state representatives won because they spent over $2 million in this district. But now these 3 yahoos have a voting record. And so it's going to be very interesting out while I'm knocking doors, talking about my constituents, about what they've been doing with their time spent down at the Capitol. They're not true representatives of LD9 and the people who live in LD9. And 2 of them, the state senator and one of the state representatives, Lorena Austin, are pretty radical. And so once we're able to have these conversations with people, Republicans hold a lead as far as registered Republicans in LD9, but the independent voters are larger than the Republicans and larger than the Democrats as registered independents in LD9. So those are the people that we're going to be engaging with throughout this primary season, and of course into the general election, because those are the people that, you know, maybe hated Trump and are sick of politics and decided just to re-register as independents. There was a lot of that going on in Arizona after the 2020 election. People were changing their registration and going independent. So those are going to be the important people here in Arizona. And I think across the country in many of these swing states, I think that's what a lot of the Republican candidates are going to be up against. So, you know, help a candidate out. If you really believe in somebody who's running, maybe give them a call, even if you don't live in their district, and find out maybe if you can make phone calls from home. It doesn't take a whole lot, but just to make phone calls to registered Republicans and encourage them to vote, not only in the primary, but in the general election, and talk to them about the candidate that you support. It's important that they hear from their fellow Arizonians or their fellow, you know, wherever you live, whatever state you live in. And you're not a person who's running for office, but you feel very strongly about a candidate. That's something that you can do to get involved. I am going to work really hard on getting some guests on my podcast next week, because I think it's important to keep these people out. Some of them are candidates, and some of them are my friends, and some of them are in the illegal alien fight with me, and other people who bring important discussions. I'm going to be working on getting them on my podcast. So rest assured, I'll be having guests again soon. But I did want to talk, you know, and this is what I do 24/7. I research illegal crime, and I have a wonderful lady who sends me just article. Some days it's over 100 articles that she sends me. And I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of illegal crime that's being committed in our country right now, and how it's really ignored by mainstream media. And so this is why I'm passionate about sharing this sort of thing with you, because I really feel like when I even talk to my constituents here, or my fellow precinct committee men and women at our LD meetings, and I talk about some of these crimes that I share on my podcast, they don't even know about this sort of thing. And with the Biden administration talking about how crime rates are down in the United States, I want to assure you that they're not. Don't get comfortable with that kind of rhetoric that they're putting out there, because it's not true. And law enforcement is not putting together the statistics of the crime rates that are happening in our country, unfortunately. Maricopa County Sheriff's Department has not published or put out the crime statistics in Maricopa County for 2 years now under a Democratic sheriff. So anyway, this is why I feel compelled to share this sort of thing with you. So that's what I'm going to be doing today, folks. Sharing some of these articles and letting you know what is happening. So an illegal immigrant who was twice released after child sex bust was finally nabbed by immigration authorities. And this was just yesterday. An illegal Ecuadorian immigrant who was twice jailed for molesting a child only to be released by authorities in Connecticut is finally in ICE custody. The pervy migrant was picked up by U.S. Immigration and ICE and Customs Enforcement agents in Hartford, Connecticut last week, more than 4 years after he was first busted on charges of an assault with a risk to a child. He presented a significant threat to the children in Connecticut communities, and he never should have been released back onto the streets, which is what the Boston field officer for the ICE office stated. So another one off the streets. Let's see. He entered the country illegally by crossing the U.S. border with Mexico into Texas in May of 2015, but was released by an immigration judge 3 months later. On March 13, 2020, he was picked up by cops in Danbury on the child sex assault case. 3 days later, officials in the Boston office lodged an immigration to get their hands on this migrant, but he was released. He was convicted of the child sex charges on April 13, 2021, and sentenced to 5 years in prison on January 13, 2022, only to have the sentence reduced to 5 years of probation. 5 years of probation for child sex crimes while you're an illegal alien in our country. But ICE was never notified, and the migrant was in the wind. So he was arrested again in Danbury on May 6, 2023 on assault and probation violation charges. He was again convicted and sentenced to 1 year behind bars, which was again reduced to probation. Once more, he was released with Connecticut officials who allegedly ignored another ICE detainer. However, federal immigration agents in the Boston REO finally caught up with him in Hartford last week, and so he is arrested. And Hartford is one of several Connecticut cities that declared itself a sanctuary city that does not fully cooperate with federal immigration authorities to hold or detain misbehaving illegals for ICE. This is just a common thing that goes on, folks. These disgusting child sex perpetrators, these illegal aliens who commit sex crimes against our children, are continually released back out into the public. That would not be happening with an American citizen if they were arrested. They would be facing the full extent of the law and held indefinitely because, the law enforcement definitely recognizes that an American citizen who is a sex offender, child sex offender, is dangerous. But these illegals who come into our country from these third world countries, who maybe the age of consensual sex is as low as 15 or 16 years old, they come in here thinking that they just have free reign with the children. And, you have to believe if they're willing to come to a new country, know they're illegals here, and decide to rape or sexually assault a child, they had to have been doing that back in their country. They had to have been doing it. But the other thing that these illegal sex offenders understand is there's no accountability here in the United States. So they will continue to do this sort of thing. And it's just a sad fact in reality that Americans have to be very, very protective of their children and demand that law enforcement in their communities do work hand in hand with ICE, and to push that their law enforcement agencies, local police departments, their sheriff's department, implement the 287G program, which trains the sheriffs and the deputies or the police officers how to arrest and detain these illegal criminals and contact ICE for them to come pick them up and handle them on a federal level. Now, unfortunately, we do have a administration that really doesn't want ICE doing this sort of thing, because the Biden administration is hell-bent on these illegal criminals running rampant in our communities. And so, you know, but we have to turn the tide, folks, in these elections that are coming up. And you really, if there's sheriffs that are up for re-election in your neighborhood, in your states or your counties, you need to really research these candidates and talk to them. Are you in favor of the 287G program? And would you have the, you know, Maricopa County Sheriff's Department be willing to implement that? And of course, Jerry Sheridan, who's running for the Maricopa County Sheriff, he is absolutely on board with that. In fact, he ran the 287G program when he was a deputy at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office for many years prior. So, you know, it's scary times, but we have to be vigilant. We have to do the research that's necessary and spread the word to our neighbors and families and friends. I'm going to share a video now. This was on Facebook, and this is a video of, let me bring this back up. It's the beast, and it is arriving in Juarez, Mexico right now. And there's another one coming closely behind it with another 1,000 of these. A lot of them are Venezuelan gang members because they're flying the Venezuelan flags, and it's all in Spanish. I can't understand it. I do go to translate and have
¿Qué tal, amigos?
help me with the articles that are
Buenas
written.
tardes. Es así como están arribando en estos momentos más migrantes a bordo del tren, como ustedes lo están observando en los vagones, más que nada.
This is how they ride. They ride on top of this train. It's so dangerous.
Ya adentrados
and they get here
en la ciudad y
to the United States on the train, end up in Juarez, Mexico, and then end up coming here. So this train had about 1,200 of them, and the person who was sharing this was saying that the next train that's coming has about 1,000 of them on that train. So this is nonstop, folks. And it's just going to keep going. And I think it's getting to be summer. It's a little hotter, but I think that they're going to be pushing as we get closer to the election. So the late summer, early fall, I think there's going to be another flood of these illegals coming, because if they're anticipating that Trump's going to win, they're going to try and get over the border before that happens. This video, so this is pretty interesting because they show the secret method used to seek migrants into the U.S. by coyotes. So this journalist was with them. I don't know how they were allowed to be with them, but these smugglers don't care. These human smugglers don't care. And when they talk about gotaways, there's a lot of them that get over the border here in Arizona. There's no trace of them, but the Border Patrol used to be able to look at footprints in these washes, these sandy washes and in the desert, and be able to say, yeah, it looks like there's about 20 of them that came through here. Yeah, it looks like there's about 50 of them. Well, part of this video shows...
have you ever been embarrassed by your smile?
I'm sorry.
Maybe you have crooked teeth?
A video before an ad. Skip the ad. All right, so. All right, so. And they're making each of them step in the footsteps of where the previous one was. And so then the last person that comes across has a little broom with him, some brush, and then they erase all of their footprints. So as Border Patrol's going up that road, they don't see the footprints, and they do it off the side of the road a little bit and then continue on into the desert, because the Border Patrol's just driving along those roads and they don't go out into the desert. But there's fences that they open. It's well-traveled routes. And this is going on a daily basis in the deserts here in Arizona. And so the whatever million that these sorry, I look like an idiot grabbing that stuff in front of my face, but that fly, they talk about 6 to 8 million that's come across the border under the Biden administration. No, it's more like probably 15 million. When you figure that there's thousands of situations like that you just saw in that video on a daily basis, thousands of them that are coming over like that are never detected, that are never counted, that aren't even put in the gotaways. And this video that I was watching last night, I talked about it on yesterday's podcast. In the 80s, they were talking and saying that, the government was saying for every 5 people that come across the border illegally, 1 is coming across undetected, or maybe it was 10 to 1. And then they were talking to this guy in Brownsville, Texas, and he was saying, this was back in the 80s, folks. And he was saying, in reality, for every 10 that come across, 4 of them are coming across undetected. So this runs true today. And even in the 80s, they were talking then in this video about they were coming from over 100 different countries across the world, And so this isn't anything new. This has been going on for over 40 years, probably 50 or 60 years before they really started paying attention to it and doing documentaries back in the 80s about this sort of thing. I want to bring up this article because this is something very recent. In fact, I think it was yesterday that this came out, the 23rd. So it was on Tuesday. Catholic Charities in the Archdiocese of San Antonio is defending itself after becoming the target of critics who claim that it improperly used federal funds to buy airfare for illegal aliens to fly to their choice of destinations. So I've talked about this before. What Catholic Charities at the beginning, like 8-9 years ago, when I traveled down to Texas after my son had been killed and talked, to the people who live there at the border and in McAllen, and they were telling us how Catholic Charities, gets a certain amount of money per illegal that they process, but the whole thing was supposed to be teach them to become assimilated. They were supposed to have them a week, 10 days, and go over things with these people, that our laws, how they are expected to act in the United States, their behavior, all those sorts of things. But what Catholic Charities did, they were getting so many of these people coming across, and they were so greedy and wanting more and more money for everybody that they were churning through their turnstiles that they bring them in, sleep a night on a cot, maybe get a fresh change of clothes and a backpack, and maybe a sandwich and a can of a bottle of water. And then they either put them on a bus to wherever they want to go or get them to the airport. Because listen, folks, I was down there in McAllen. I was down there in El Paso. I watched the Catholic Charities bring these illegals in. They bypassed TSA, didn't have to go through the x-ray machines, carried open containers of water, sodas, everything that American citizens aren't allowed to do. They weren't patted down. They didn't go through the x-ray machines. Their backpacks weren't put through the x-ray machines. I watched this 8-9 years ago. Watch this happening before my eyes. So Catholic Charities was doing this long ago. And so 2 South Texas lawmakers blasted the charity on Thursday for using federal funds to purchase the airfare, and said that the funds were intended to reimburse nonprofits for food, shelter, and humanitarian expenses, not free travel programs for Joe Biden's illegal aliens. So Henry Cuellar, who's a Democrat, and Monica de la Cruz, who's a Republican, warned the charity that it improperly used the money. So they're going to be looking after them. These tax dollars were not intended to fly these illegals all over the country. They misused funds and sent these illegal immigrants where their preferred destination was, with taxpayers' hard-earned money. This is just simply unacceptable. Catholic Charities of San Diego admitted to the station that it had been allocated $10.8 million in funding to care for migrants in their area, and that it used the funds to buy plane tickets for illegals. However, Jose Antonio Fernandez, CEO of Catholic Charities of San Antonio, insists that the airfare purchases were perfectly in line with the limits of the funding rules. But he said that the FEMA grant given to his organization clearly stated that you could provide transportation. The funds were given to us to provide food, clothing, all these activities, including transportation. Well, you know what? A bus ticket is a lot less than an airline ticket. And when the American taxpayer is footing the bill, and you see, as he said here, it's a grant from FEMA, and it's from the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, the FEMA grant given. So this is how this money is filtered. American taxpayer money is filtered because FEMA gets billions of dollars in funding a year. And of course, then they just filter this money through these nonprofits and these NGOs to take care of the problem so that they're not out there in the public doing this sort of thing. They can let the nasty work be done by the charities and the the NGOs and the nonprofits, and enrich those people in the meantime. These kinds of places, Catholic Charities is never going to slow down. And I've had a couple conversations with people where they say, yeah, but Catholic Charities isn't part of the Catholic Church. Well, if you go to church and you're a Catholic, you will know that they do an extra donation basket, and they put it out for Catholic Charities. So they are intertwined, they are involved in it, and I would highly suggest that you no longer make those extra donations to Catholic Charities, because they are actually involved in human trafficking. They are involved in transporting these illegals all over the United States. They aren't doing what it was intended for them to do. And they were supposed to provide relief and not have to have Border Patrol and the federal government have all of these huge facilities built and put up, and transferring our Border Patrol agents from protecting our borders to these large facilities to become babysitters. That's why the federal government was giving money to some of these NGOs and these charities, like Catholic Charities and nonprofits, to ease the burden on Border Patrol. But now Border Patrol processes them, keeps them in their centers there, and then transports them to Catholic Charities and these other NGOs, and then they do their little processing thing, and then they get them on a bus or an airline, a flight to wherever they want to go in the United States. So it's actually almost like we're double paying, because we're paying the Border Patrol salary, we're paying for the Department of Homeland Security to be funded, we're paying that snake Mayorkas' salary, and then they're giving our taxpayer money to these NGOs and nonprofits to go ahead and finish up their dirty work. But it's absolutely sickening what's happening to American taxpayer money. This is an interesting article. I want to share this one. And this is why I talk about it's so important for you guys to look into the sheriffs that you are electing. So a Democrat Texas sheriff is helping give migrants flown to Martha's Vineyard victims of crime visas. So these are U visas. And when an illegal is a victim of a crime, if they've been assaulted, if they've been raped, if they've been whatever crime may be committed against them, they have a way for that it'll allow them to work legally in the U.S. as they await their U visas. U visas, short for U, non-immigrant status visas, are granted to some illegal immigrants who have been victims of crimes and yet have helped law enforcement or government officials in the investigation or prosecution of criminal activity, said a website for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. As U visas could eventually transition into permanent resident status and perhaps even citizenship, the federal government caps the numbers of U visas each year at 10,000. So now you've got a Democratic sheriff, get a good look at his face, a Democratic sheriff in Texas who's using this now and telling these nearly 50 immigrants, illegals, who Ron DeSantis helped send to Martha's Vineyard. And so in September 2022, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida sent nearly 50 migrants, which it's really illegals, who made a brief stop in his state after crossing into the U.S. and Texas to Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, an island with 6 of the wealthiest, most exclusive towns in America, all which adopted sanctuary policies regarding illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, several years ago. So they came into the U.S. illegally in Texas, and then they ended up in Florida, and Ron DeSantis put them on a plane and flew them to Martha's Vineyard. And now this Texas sheriff, who they left Texas, they went to Florida. It was Ron DeSantis's problem. Now he's decided to give these people U visas, and they will be able to stay indefinitely here in the United States. He's using this, and this is what the Democrats, the liberals, all of these elected officials are doing. They're using these laws to benefit their agenda. These U visas are capped at $10,000 visas a year. I guarantee you, through the Biden administration, that's probably gone up, soared in numbers, and nobody's keeping track of that sort of thing. Pretty easy for somebody like him just to say, we're going to help you apply for this. If they'd have been victims of crime and helped law enforcement figure out and catch whoever had committed a crime against them and get that criminal off the streets, yeah, I can understand getting them a U visa. But these migrants who were flown to Martha's Vineyard, they didn't care where they were going, as long as they were on a plane going somewhere further into the United States. So, and then of course, Martha's Vineyard wanted nothing to do with them. No. We washed our hands of these people when we passed these sanctuary policy laws. And so they can't have these third world people on Martha's Vineyard. Come on. What will that do to their property values, people? So it's just amazing to me how much is overlooked. That isn't mainstream media news, what this Texas sheriff is doing. But by darn, the people who are in his county need to understand what he's doing, and they need to vote accordingly and make sure that he doesn't get back into office. They need to be working with somebody who's pro 287G program, right? Make sure that these people get out of office, and they're not allowed to do these sort of things to their communities. Will those people be coming back to Texas and spending those 50 plus migrants? Will they be coming back to Texas and spending time in his county? Does he care? No, he's going to help them get a U visa, and then he doesn't care where they go to. So Colorado turns schools into welfare agencies as thousands of needy migrant children enroll. So Denver and other Colorado communities have transformed schools into welfare agencies as tens of thousands of children of illegal border crossers flood into the state schools, where they get free food, free clothing, free shoes, free healthcare, and a free education at the taxpayer's expense. You know, and we go back to the 80s when the Department of Education decided that these illegal children deserved an education in our education system, even though a lot of those seasonal workers back then weren't paying taxes, but their children deserve a taxpayer-funded education. The Washington Post reported that the transformation of the Centennial State schools from educational facilities to full-on welfare agencies, where the kids of all ages, many of whom have never gone to school in their entire lives, are enrolled by the thousands. The paper began talking about an 11-year-old Alberto who was enrolled in Aurora, Colorado. And at 11, he had never attended school, spoke no English, And despite this, he had been shoehorned into fourth grade, even though his presence brings down everyone in the classroom because he has no educational basis to be in the fourth grade. So what is this doing to the children in our education system, folks? And this isn't just happening in Colorado. Not by any means. This is really, really, I mean, you know, you hear about the fluffy surface kind of stuff that they talk about illegal immigration, but nobody really talks about this on mainstream media. When you dig down and find out this is what's happening in our schools, an uneducated 11-year-old illegal is placed in fourth grade. Because why? They don't want the stigma of him being 11 years old and being in kindergarten. That's where he belongs. But he really doesn't belong in our schools. Our schools have already been damaged enough by COVID, and the education level of a lot of our students was brought down by at least a grade level during that whole COVID madness when they weren't allowed to go to school and being home taught by these indoctrinating, idiotic teachers who were doing anything and everything but providing an education for these children. Some of these things just make me so mad. All right, this is an interesting article. So, this was on Breitbart, so some of you may have seen this, but Biden's DHS released into the U.S. an illegal warrant for child rape in Brazil. So, after he was detained by Border Patrol agents, he was released into the U.S. Interior and placed into the Alternatives to Detention program. In June of 2022, he was arrested and charged in Framingham, Massachusetts, for assault and battery of a member of his household and felony witness intimidation. The following month, he was charged with threats to commit a crime and violation of a restraining order. And by July of 2023, a criminal and civil court in Brazil sought custody of him on charges of rape of a vulnerable person or statutory rape of a minor 14 years old or younger. And if convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison. On March 4th, the federal immigration judge issued a final deportation order after he failed to appear in court. Oh, surprise, surprise, he didn't appear in court. And on March 22nd, ICE officials deported him to Brazil after arresting him in Massachusetts. Well, thank God ICE officials were there, because the local law enforcement there in Massachusetts didn't care what was going on, did they? And how do you have these foreigners coming across the border? I mean, I know a lot of these third world countries don't have these databases that our Border Patrol agents are able to get on and verify if these are, in fact, wanted and known criminals. I get that. But some of them are. Some of them are known, especially on the terrorist watch list. They've got cross-referencing. But my point being, this is why the Biden administration policies and traitorous Mayorkas's policies are so dangerous to the United States. We don't know who these people are. We don't know what their background is. We don't know what they've done, where they're coming from. I mean, there's even been these Venezuelan gang members showing up at the border with these tats all over their body, identifying them as these Venezuelan gang members, and Border Patrol is releasing them into our country. It's insane. I'm going to show you another video. This is in New York. So, stop this. So, this is the Row Migrant Hotel in New York City. And these are the newcomers, Biden's newcomers, fighting outside the hotel, hitting each other with objects and hands and feet. And traffic is, of course, blocked. And this is what the Biden administration has invited into our country. These are who the Biden administration is providing free hotels to. They get room service and 3 square meals a day. And they block traffic and fight each other like they're Neanderthals. That guy has a big, long metal stick that he's waving around. Well, the other one has a stick. They have belts. They don't care that they're blocking traffic. Can you imagine having to go through this if you're driving through downtown New York? This is the kind of gang activity that's happening right in New York City outside of the hotels that they're being provided everything for free in. And yet they're demanding more. It isn't good enough for them. Why isn't the Biden administration putting these people to work? It's funny that they're coming here for work and a better life, but none of them are going to work. They're just all out doing this sort of stuff, committing crimes, stealing things. And this is why I'm saying, folks, it is going to get worse this summer because these people are going to become desperate. Living month after month in a hotel and provided with the 3 square meals of food that they get, that any homeless person in America, any homeless American would be thrilled to have. But these people come from foreign countries. And our food is not the same. They don't know about the process of assimilation. And in this video from the 80s that I watched about the illegal immigration, you know, this man, this Hispanic who was in Brownsville was saying, 1986, that the assimilation problem is going to get bigger and bigger as more of these people cross our border. And he was saying, you can practice your heritage at home, but speak the language of the land when you're out in the marketplace. That's what assimilation is all about. Nobody's telling you to stop, you know, not be proud of your heritage or whatnot, but you can't bring your culture to the streets of America. That's not what we are. We are an English-speaking nation. We are a Christian nation. And in God we trust. It's on our money. These people who come here are the complete opposite. And a lot of them are terrorists from the Middle East who are coming over. That's who is agitating all of these pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic protests at these colleges. These are people who've been let over our border, these fighting age men. I'm watching some of the videos and thinking that could have been a guy who came over last week, you know, who didn't say anything to cameras, to independent journalists that were down there. But they've probably spent enough time in Mexico to know you need to shave your beard, you need to do this, you need to do that to kind of fit in and make it look like you're from South America or from Mexico. Those are the people that are on the campuses creating all this mayhem. I'm going to show you one more post. And things are getting, you know, even worse here at the border in Arizona because of what's happening in Texas and how they're enforcing things. But we continue to see an increase in border crossings in San Diego in the past 3 days, and this was on April 22nd. Over 2,000 migrants have been street released. I wish they would say illegals, have been street released, running our total to over 130,000 since the federal government began dropping them onto our streets in September. So this is overwhelming San Diego. Of course, their detention areas and their places where they have the illegal staying, they went bankrupt. They ran out of money. I think I read an article last week where a bunch of more money was being infused into that center so that they could continue dropping these people off on the streets. But you've got a huge amount of people that come across the border into California, and you have a lot of them coming across into Arizona. And Highway 8 is a direct shot up from the border in Arizona, and a lot of these illegals go right up to that Interstate 8, and then they'll either go up into Phoenix, get on the I-10 and go up into Phoenix, or they'll go west on the 8 and end up in San Diego. So, you know, a lot of them that are coming over in Arizona, because it's a lot easier to cross the border in Arizona than it is in Southern California in some areas. Right there at San Diego, there is border fence. There are border patrol agents there. What they're doing at this point, I don't know. San Yedro has a actual gate bridge crossing processing center there. Not a processing center. It's a port of entry. So, I don't know if some of them are being smuggled in there, what's happening, but these crime rates in the United States are not going to be going down by any means. That wasn't what I wanted to see. Oh, the other thing I wanted to talk about real quick with Arizona politics. So, and then we'll end the podcast because I'm about out of time. But so, a lot of things are in the news right now about the squatters and what's happening across the United States. And of course, that Venezuelan guy who was on social media telling people how to do it. We're going to do this. We're going to go take properties. Senator Wendy Rogers, she put together a bill, and veto queen Governor Hobbs vetoed her squatter bill. It's intentional, easy for her with security, hard on us peasants. Squatter rights will not prevail. Homeowners will stand for property rights. So she put out this statement that the issue of squatters taking over people's houses is growing across the nation, including here in Arizona. Yet Governor Katie Hobbs is refusing to address the problem. And Wendy Rogers worked to combat these crimes with a bipartisan measure that was passed in the House and the Senate, and Hobbs vetoed today that would have expedited the removal of these criminals and strengthened the homeowner property rights. If a stranger invades a home and unlawfully claims a right to live there, SB 1129 would have allowed the homeowner to request law enforcement immediately remove that person from the property. Refusal to leave would have been treated as trespassing under Arizona laws. And, she was a realtor. One of the senators, Justine Watsack, was saying, as a realtor, I've personally encountered a squatter occupying a home I was showing to a client. It was a terrifying threat to my safety, the safety of my clients, as well as to the homeowners. And when I called the police, I was told there was not much that they could do. So this is a growing problem. And unfortunately, we've got a governor here in Arizona who could care less. Criminals are scheming. Oh, I've already read all that. So anyway, that's something that just happened in Arizona. We've got a terrible governor here who actually does not give a hoot about citizen rights. She isn't about strengthening border security here in Arizona, even though over 88% of the fentanyl that arrives in the United States comes across the border in Arizona. Human trafficking is at an all-time high because of what's happening in Texas. These people are shifting over to the Arizona border because it's wide open, folks. Over 300 miles of barbed wire. So heck, let's just go there. And she doesn't care about squatters' rights now. That's evident. There's a lot of election integrity bills that have actually made it out of the House and the Senate and arrived on her desk, and she vetoed it. It was bipartisanly agreed to, and she vetoed those sort of things. It's very apparent what's going on here in the state of Arizona, especially with what the Attorney General just did with these fake electors and indicting them with all of these felony charges. They don't want election integrity here in Arizona. And the voter rolls are a huge mess here in Arizona. I'm still, and I've talked to my son who's in the military and his wife. They have called, they have gone online, they have told them that they're no longer in Arizona. I'm still getting ballots for both of them. I'm getting ballots for my son who lives in Texas. I'm getting ballots. I got several ballots for my dead son. It's been, in next month, it's going to be 10 years. And I still got ballots for him in 2022 and for the presidential preference election here in March. What is wrong with these people? We're a computerized nation. Why doesn't the Office of Vital Statistics immediately contact the Secretary of State's office to remove somebody from the voter rolls the minute that their death certificate is processed in the Vital Statistics department here? Anyway, enough for this week. I am, going to finish off my day. I have a jam-packed day today, but I will hopefully start next week with a guest on and have some interesting conversations happen. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.